Welcome back to the Entrepreneurial Edge. Now for show updates, you can follow us on our Twitter handle, it's EntrePEdge, or you can email us on entrep@abn360.com. Still with me in studio, Tony Pinfold, Chairman of GWM SA. Tony, let's take you back to those early days, 2007. Of course, there are all the financial challenges that many entrepreneurs face when they're starting up a new business. Tell us about some of those and how you've overcome them and the type of lessons that you'd like to pass on to other entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Sam. I think at the time, one of our biggest challenges was, first of all, to get the financing banks in South Africa to approve our vehicle and to agree to fund it. Because in China, for example, 95% of purchases actually are with cash. Whereas in South Africa, it's probably 95%, maybe more, that's funded by the banks. So this was a critical part of our business, convincing the banks that they should finance them and on similar terms to what they were financing other brands.
How did you convince them?
Well, to begin with, we didn't, frankly speaking. We were handicapped in terms of probably the period that the banks would fund our vehicles for, and also probably the deposit was slightly different. And then it was a question of appointing a dealer network, and a dealer network, the way the system works in South Africa is that most dealers in fact run on a floor plan, and the floor plan is provided by the banks in any event. So we had to convince the banks that this was a reasonable vehicle, it was reasonably priced, we were a stable distributor and importer, and on that basis they would provide floor plan facilities for our dealer network, and this took also a little time and effort.
Yeah, so of course there are all those challenges, and it's not a straight road being an entrepreneur starting up a new business in a country like South Africa. Tell us about some of the knocks that you've had along the way. Are there any mistakes that you made that you wish you hadn't, of course?
Yes, indeed, many mistakes.
How have you ever misread the market, misread situations?
Absolutely. I think it's fair to say that this is not a scientific business. You cannot foretell what is going to happen. For example, when the recession hit South Africa, we didn't think it was a recession. I don't think any of us did. But all of a sudden, the motor vehicle sales just dropped.
Off a cliff.
Off a cliff, absolutely. Like someone put the light out.
And the rand also dropped at the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So you can't, in our business, stop supply. You've ordered and you've committed, probably 3-4 months ahead. You can't stop that train. It's coming and it keeps coming. So to slow down that order train is actually impossible. Then you have to convince your distributor or your manufacturer, that there is a problem. Now in China, they still don't know what a recession is. Never heard of it.
Interesting you say that, because we're all worried about China slowing down right now.
I wouldn't worry too much. Slowing down, but what, 7.5 GDP as compared to what? Where are we? If we do 3, we'll be very happy.
Yeah, certainly we'll be very happy. Worried about maybe only getting 2.5 this year.
Exactly. So it's all relative. So I don't think anybody could read that. Our problem at that time was we didn't have the financial muscle to carry it. So we had to be pretty creative. So
a lesson learned from that situation for another blowout, because we haven't really come out of that trough as yet. There have been an improvement, but would you say you need financial buffers? You need to prepare for rainy days. How do you learn from that?
I think the lessons that I learned from that specifically were the following: that first of all, you must never think that you're on top of the waves all the time, because the waves can change, they can break in a different direction, and you have to plan to a certain degree for that. And the other thing is that you need to think very carefully in terms of your plan B. Did we in fact have a plan B? We didn't to begin with, but we invented one very quickly. So really, I think also there was a fair amount of luck involved, if I'm honest. And I tried to be honest at all times. So yeah, we were quite lucky to survive that recession. Our numbers dropped in terms of our sales dropped, probably much greater than the industry as a whole, because I think the first thing that happened was, people in a situation like that become very risk adverse, and they run to probably more established brands in terms of making a buying decision.
Yeah. Do you think you've won over the South African public to a degree? Are you ready to actually start taking on the big guys with your product? Is the quality ready? Is your business ready?
That's a very interesting question. I think, and I don't want to be big-headed or egotistical about it, because it's actually not me. It's the product has improved out of China from our particular manufacturer immeasurably. And I think the market has recognized that we are a good brand. The motoring press now, every time they write an article on one of our products, call us the best of the Chinese. We would like to try and get away from being the best of the Chinese by far. How do they compare against the Japanese, the European, the Americans, whoever else is in the marketplace? And I think we're getting there.
Do the Chinese, you're the third largest export market outside of China. Do they now come to you for product ideas, innovative ideas? Do they actually consult with you at all?
Yes, they do indeed, and they're very amenable to input. This market is different, meaning Africa, not just South Africa. It has its own special needs, and you need to build you need to build vehicles for a specific region, in my opinion. And yes, they're very good with that. They're very quick with their R&D. They're very amenable. They don't think they know everything, which is very nice. It's refreshing to work with people like that.
Yeah, it certainly is refreshing to work with people who don't think they know everything, because that's nearly impossible, especially if you're not living in the country. And what about the names of the cars? Because I know that's been a bone of contention for many manufacturers in South Africa. Have they had to change some of the names?
Yes, Sam, that's an interesting one.
Because tell us about some of the craziest names that they've proposed for the market.
You must understand that the Chinese manufacturers have not been out of China for very long. I suppose one of the prime examples of a name that wouldn't work in South Africa was our first single cab pickup was called a Sailor. And the connotation of sailor and pickup just doesn't mix, How
are you going to market that one? That was an
we changed the name. and then we had the next pickup series was called Wingle. And we thought, well, that's definitely going to be abbreviated to something a lot
We
shorter.
won't even go there today. So there we go. You had issues, but they understand the fact that they need to change those names.
Absolutely, Sam. Yeah.
You of course grew up in Africa, so you're not foreign to what happens outside of South Africa. Tell us about how you plan to grow the brand in South Africa, to be able to move into the rest of the continent.
Great. Okay. We've established a good presence in South Africa. We think that we can grow our market share in South Africa. We think there's an enormous amount of potential in Africa itself. And obviously the countries closest to us that are in fact right-hand drive countries would be our first target. And in fact we are already, we do already have a presence in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, Mozambique. And we're looking at other regions as well. One of the difficulties of entering into those markets is, number one, obviously the brand has not been exposed. Also, in a lot of those countries, financing is an issue in that there are few formal lending channels to purchase motor vehicles in those countries. So it's something you've got to try to put together a whole package. In other words,
surely your past would come into that as well. Or would you be able to look at using that experience from the past?
Sure. Well, as I say, one of the things that we're doing is discussing with South African banks, because they all say they want to go into Africa. We're saying, well, come with us, let's go together. Mm-hmm. and build packages of finance together with the vehicle, and guarantees and fit tracking devices so you know where they are. And you might need to, for example, adjust the deposit rate to begin with. So it has a huge amount of possibilities.
You've also mentioned manufacturing and possible plans to manufacture. You're still a very small in terms of volumes, you don't sell a lot of cars here. Is there enough scale for you to be able to actually look at that, or is government looking at ways to be able to get you to a point that you have enough scale to produce in South Africa?
I'm glad you've raised this. For me, it's quite a contentious point. The South African government often make the statements that they want to encourage industrial development, and particularly in certain sectors, one of which is automobile manufacture. Now, automobile manufacture, for 40 years, there has not been a new entrant. There's been a lot of contract manufacturing with existing manufacturers, but the targets to qualify for all the incentives, for example, are 50,000 units.
And I mean, you only sold 6,500 or so last year, so far off from that.
Well, a little more than that, but yes, but we nowhere near the critical volumes. We've suggested, and whenever anybody asks me this question, I say, you know what, if government is realistic about this, then there needs to be a step-in period for new entrants, because it took the existing guys 40 years to get where they are.
Yeah.
How do you expect a new entrant to come in and compete on the same playing field with the same rules? It's not going to happen.
But here you are, you're still growing. You grew 40% last year. Before I let you go, any regrets? Are you happy that you made the choice to move into the auto sector and, of course, bring GWM SA here?
No, I'm very happy. I think it was a wonderful choice. I'm very fortunate. It's not because I'm clever. I think I had the right opportunity at the right time. And I had possibly the drive. And I don't give up easy.
Don't give up easily. And as you say, luck sometimes plays a little part of that. But I'm sure it was a lot more planning. And remember to have plan B. That's what we take out of today's show. Thanks for joining us today. That's all we have time for this week. Of course, be sure to tune in again next week for another episode of the Entrepreneurial Edge. Until then, have a good evening.